Former President Donald Trump's hush money criminal trial in Lower Manhattan entering day 13 as the former president continues to push buttons, you might say, in court.
This after repeatedly failing to abide by the gag order set by the judge before the trial began. Now, Good Day's Robert Moses, he is live in Lower Manhattan with more on the punishment the former president could face if he continues to disobey the judge's order. Robert, the judge seems to be at his wits' end at this point.
Yeah, Tashani and Dan, the judge here was none too pleased with the former president, that is for sure. But he says the last thing he wants to do is to put the former president in jail. Still, he says he will do so if necessary because he says he has a job to do, which is to, quote, protect the integrity of the justice system.
Frankly, you know what? Our Constitution is much more important than jail. It's not even close. I'll do that sacrifice any day.
Former President Donald Trump sounds unbowed by Judge Juan Merchan's threat to jail him if he continues to violate his gag order.
Hey friends, Dr. John is here. So what just happened, guys? In a federal courtroom, Trump reportedly threatened the judge after adverse rulings dismantled his defense strategy, a moment so legally reckless that even his own attorneys were left stunned and terrified. This wasn't frustration, but direct threats that would have gotten any ordinary person handcuffed and jailed on contempt charges on the spot. Yet because it's Trump, it's playing out as another chapter in his spectacular legal meltdown. The sheer audacity of what happened is almost impossible to process. Think about what it means for someone who once occupied the Oval Office, who took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, to stand in a federal courtroom and threaten the very judge.
It's an unprecedented possibility. A judge threatening to put a former and perhaps future American president behind bars. Early yesterday, Merchan held former President Trump in contempt of court and fined him $1,000 for these comments he made about jurors on April 22nd.
That jury was picked so fast, 95% Democrats. The area is mostly all Democrat. You think of it as just a purely Democrat area. It's a very unfair situation.
After Merchan threatened the former president with jail time, testimony continued. Prosecutors called former Trump Organization controller Jeffrey McConney to the stand. McConney told prosecutor Matthew Colangelo that he never saw a retainer agreement with Michael Cohen. Prosecutors charged the former president with falsifying business records by claiming Cohen had been reimbursed for legal expenses that stemmed from a retainer agreement that in reality did not exist. Authorities say Cohen was actually reimbursed for paying Stormy Daniels to stay quiet about a sexual encounter she claims to have had with Donald Trump,
who's supposed to be impartially administering justice under that same Constitution. It's the kind of behavior you expect to see in countries with collapsing rule of law, not in the United States. And yet, here we are, watching it unfold in real time while Trump's legal and political situation continues to deteriorate with each passing day. Multiple eyewitnesses and court reporters have confirmed that Trump absolutely exploded when the judge handed down rulings that struck key elements of his defense and authorized further criminal investigation. The scene inside that courtroom must have been absolutely wild. Lawyers scrambling to contain their client's outburst. Security personnel moving into position.
Today, former President Donald Trump is facing another round of possible violations to a gag order in the hush money trial. CBS 2's Doug Williams is live outside criminal court with the details for us. Doug.
Mary, this morning, another attempt by the prosecution to potentially hold former President Donald Trump in contempt. But the difference this morning is that this time, possible jail time hangs in the balance.
Ridiculous show trial, Biden trial, I call it.
Former President Trump on his way into a hearing about his public comments in that very hallway, sounding off once again.
We have a very conflicted judge, unfortunately.
Inside the courtroom, the prosecution focused mostly on comments Trump made last week, including comments on the judge, the jury, as well as witnesses like David Pecker and Michael Cohen. The prosecution telling the judge, quote, The defendant thinks the rules are different for him.
Ready to intervene if things escalated further. The judge trying desperately to maintain order while Trump apparently lost his mind and started making threats. It's the kind of courtroom drama that legal professionals will be talking about for decades. What makes this so incredibly dangerous for Trump is that threatening a federal judge isn't just bad optics or poor legal strategy. This is potentially criminal behavior that could result in immediate contempt charges. It could lead to additional criminal counts being added to his already overwhelming list of legal problems. It could result in heightened sentencing.
And about jail time, quote, "Because we prefer to minimize disruptions to this proceeding, we are not seeking jail." Also this morning, Trump addressed the protests on college campuses.
This is a movement from the left. These are radical left lunatics. We're not letting them take over the USA.
And another exchange I want to tell you about from inside the courtroom. This is between Donald Trump's attorney and the judge when discussing Trump's comments about the jury specifically. The judge asks, did he violate the gag order? Attorney says, I'm making an argument, interrupts him, and the judge says, I'm not accepting your argument. That hearing lasted a little bit less than an hour. No ruling as of yet. The trial itself continues with the former attorney right now of Stormy Daniels. Meantime, we're live outside criminal court here in Lower Manhattan. Doug Williams, CBS 2 News.
Doug, thank you.
If he's ultimately convicted of anything, because judges always consider a defendant's conduct during proceedings when determining appropriate punishment. And it basically guarantees that every judge who deals with Trump's cases going forward is going to be watching him like a hawk, waiting for any excuse to throw the book at him. But here's what really makes this situation so wild. Even Trump's own attorneys and closest allies are reportedly stunned and panicked by what happened. These are people who've been defending Trump through everything. People who've seen him at his absolute worst and thought they understood how he operates under pressure. People whose entire professional reputation is tied to successfully representing this client. And even they're describing panic in Trump's camp after this courtroom incident. That tells you everything you need to know about how serious this is. When your own lawyers are freaking out about your behavior, when your political allies are trying to figure out how to distance themselves from what you just did, when even the people whose job it is to make you look good are struggling to spin this in any positive way, you've crossed a line that probably shouldn't have been crossed. Legal experts across the political spectrum are saying that threats against the judiciary are nearly unheard of among former presidents. This kind of conduct invites immediate and severe consequences from the justice system. We're talking about potential contempt charges that could be filed almost immediately. We're talking about restrictions on Trump's ability to appear in court or speak about ongoing cases. We're talking about judges in other cases looking at this behavior and deciding they need to be much stricter with Trump because clearly he doesn't respect the judicial process. The ripple effects from this one incident could make every single legal battle Trump is fighting significantly harder to win. The security response alone tells you how seriously this threat was taken by court officials. They heightened security around the courthouse. They provided additional protection for the judge. These aren't precautions you take because someone got a little upset. These are measures you implement when there's a genuine concern about potential violence or intimidation. Think about what that means. A former president of the United States made threats serious enough that federal marshals and court security had to take action to protect a sitting federal judge. That's absolutely extraordinary. That's something that simply doesn't happen in a functioning democracy with respect for the rule of law. The judge actually admonished Trump during the hearing, warned his legal team about contempt and obstruction, tried to restore order to proceedings that had completely gone off the rails. And Trump's response to being warned about his behavior was apparently to double down with more threats and accusations about unfair treatment. It's like watching someone dig their own grave deeper and deeper, while everyone around them is screaming to stop digging. The self-destructive nature of this behavior is almost hard to comprehend unless you understand that Trump has spent his entire life never really facing consequences for his actions, never having to back down or submit to authority, never accepting that there are institutions more powerful than he is. That mindset has finally run headlong into the federal judiciary, and the collision is absolutely spectacular to witness. Let's break down exactly what happened during this hearing and why the judge's rulings were so devastating to Trump's legal position. According to reports, this was supposed to be a routine hearing on evidentiary matters and procedural issues, the kind of thing that usually doesn't generate much attention or drama, but it turned into a complete disaster for Trump's defense team as the judge systematically rejected their arguments and issued rulings that struck at the very heart of their legal strategy. The judge authorized further criminal investigation into areas that Trump has fought tooth and nail to keep secret, potentially including financial records, communications about classified documents, and interactions related to January 6th and election interference allegations. This is exactly what Trump's lawyers have been trying to prevent because they know that deeper investigation is going to uncover evidence that makes their job defending him exponentially harder. The judge also struck key elements of Trump's defense, which suggests that arguments Trump was counting on to either dismiss charges or create reasonable doubt with a jury have been ruled inadmissible or legally insufficient. When your defense strategy gets gutted by pretrial rulings, you're in serious trouble because it limits your options at trial and makes conviction much more likely. Trump apparently watched this happening in real time and realized just how bad his situation was becoming, which triggered the outburst that's now dominating headlines and making everything worse. The specific nature of Trump's threats and accusations is crucial to understanding why this incident is so serious. According to eyewitnesses, Trump directly questioned the judge's impartiality and warned of consequences if rulings continue to go against him. Let's unpack what that actually means. Questioning a judge's impartiality in open court isn't just disrespectful. It's an attack on the legitimacy of the entire judicial process and can be grounds for contempt. Every judge has to maintain the appearance of fairness and impartiality to preserve public confidence in the justice system. When a defendant stands up and essentially accuses the judge of bias or corruption, that's not protected speech. That's interference with the administration of justice. The warning about consequences is even more serious because it could be interpreted as an implicit threat of violence, retaliation, or intimidation. Federal judges are protected by law from threats and intimidation, specifically because the justice system cannot function if judges are afraid to make decisions based on law and evidence. Trump's behavior crossed that line in a way that's going to have immediate legal ramifications. Legal scholars are already discussing potential contempt charges, which could be filed as either civil or criminal contempt, depending on how prosecutors and the judge want to proceed. Civil contempt is designed to compel compliance with court orders, while criminal contempt is designed to punish behavior that obstructs justice or shows disrespect for the court. Trump's conduct could easily justify criminal contempt charges, which would add yet another legal problem to his already overwhelming list of legal battles. The reaction from Trump's own attorneys during this incident tells you how unexpected and problematic his outburst was. These are experienced lawyers who've been through high-pressure situations before, who understand courtroom decorum and the importance of maintaining professional composure. And even they were apparently caught off guard by Trump's decision to directly confront the judge with threats and accusations. You can imagine the scene playing out in real time. Trump's lawyers probably trying desperately to calm him down, trying to redirect the conversation back to legal arguments, trying to minimize the damage while simultaneously processing the fact that their client just made their jobs infinitely harder. Because here's the thing about representing someone who threatens a judge. Every other judge who touches any of Trump's cases is now going to know about this incident. They're going to be on high alert for any similar behavior. They're going to be less inclined to give Trump the benefit of the doubt on procedural matters. They're going to be more willing to impose strict conditions and sanctions because Trump has demonstrated that he doesn't respect the judicial process. Trump's lawyers are probably having emergency meetings right now, trying to figure out how to walk back the damage, how to prevent contempt charges, how to convince other judges that this was an isolated incident that won't be repeated. But the reality is that you can't unring this bell. The threat happened. It's been documented by court reporters and witnessed by multiple people, and it's now part of the permanent record that will follow Trump through every legal proceeding going forward. Now let's talk about the broader legal implications of this absolutely stunning incident. Beyond just the immediate contempt issues that Trump is facing, we need to understand how this moment of uncontrolled rage is going to reverberate through every single legal battle he's currently fighting. Trump is facing criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions right now. He's dealing with civil lawsuits on numerous fronts. There are ongoing investigations that could result in additional charges at any moment. And every single one of these legal matters is is now potentially impacted by what happened in that courtroom. The consequences are going to be staggering and long-lasting. Think about how prosecutors are going to view this incident. Prosecutors who might have been willing to negotiate plea deals or reduce charges are going to look at what Trump did and decide that he isn't someone who can be trusted to comply with any agreement. Why would they offer leniency to someone who threatens judges? Why would they trust him to follow the terms of any negotiated resolution when he can't even maintain basic decorum during a hearing? Prosecutors are human beings too, and they're going to have a visceral reaction to someone threatening a colleague in the judiciary. They're going to be less flexible, less willing to cut deals, and more determined to secure the harshest possible outcome. That's just human nature. Consider how judges are going to respond to this incident. Judges who might have been inclined to show leniency or give Trump the benefit of the doubt on evidentiary disputes are going to be much more strict because threatening a federal judge demonstrates contempt for the entire system. Every judge in America is part of a professional community. They know each other. They respect each other. When a defendant threatens one of them, it's an attack on all of them. Judges who might have been neutral or even sympathetic to some of Trump's arguments are now going to view him much more skeptically. They're going to be less willing to give him breaks on procedural issues, less likely to grant continuances, more likely to rule against him on close calls. The institutional solidarity of the judiciary is going to work against Trump in ways that his lawyers are probably only beginning to understand. The jury implications are equally serious. Juries are supposed to be impartial and consider only the evidence presented at trial, but jurors are also human beings who read the news and form impressions. If Trump gets convicted of any criminal charges, the judge handling sentencing is absolutely going to consider his conduct toward the judiciary when determining an appropriate punishment. Threatening a federal judge is exactly the kind of aggravating factor that results in harsher sentences because it demonstrates lack of remorse, continued danger to the community, and unwillingness to accept responsibility. Trump's lawyers have probably been telling him for months that he needs to show respect for the legal process, needs to appear contrite and cooperative, needs to avoid any behavior that could be seen as obstruction or intimidation. And Trump apparently just threw all of that advice out the window in one moment of rage. Let's be really clear about what this means for sentencing. If Trump is convicted on any of the criminal charges he's facing, the judge could easily use this incident as justification for imposing a sentence at the high end of the guidelines range. In some cases, threatening a judicial officer could even be considered a basis for an upward departure, meaning a sentence above what would normally be applicable. Trump's lawyers know this. They've been trying to avoid anything that could be used against him at sentencing. And now their client has given prosecutors and judges a gift-wrapped piece of evidence that he's dangerous and unrepentant. That's going to cost him dearly if he ends up convicted of anything. The political fallout from this incident is going to be massive and will likely accelerate the collapse of Trump's remaining support that we've been discussing in previous coverage. Republican allies who were already wavering about whether to continue defending Trump now have to decide if they want to be associated with someone who threatens federal judges. That's a really tough sell to moderate voters and to anyone who cares about rule of law and respect for institutions. Even hardline MAGA supporters might start questioning whether Trump's behavior has crossed lines that are indefensible. The optics of a former president threatening a judge are just terrible from every possible angle. It makes Trump look unhinged, vindictive, and dangerous. It reinforces every negative narrative about Trump being a threat to democratic norms and institutions. It gives Democrats ammunition to argue that Trump is unfit for office and represents a danger to the constitutional order. Republican congressional leaders are going to face incredibly difficult questions as a result of this incident. They're already dealing with internal party warfare and mass defections from Trump's support base. Now they have to answer questions about whether they condemn Trump's threats against the judiciary. That's a no-win situation. If they condemn Trump, they anger the base and invite primary challenges from pro-Trump candidates. But if they defend or excuse his behavior, they look like they're okay with threatening judges, which is politically toxic with moderate voters. The incident also undermines any remaining argument that Trump's legal troubles are just politically motivated persecution. When you're threatening judges and losing control in courtrooms, it's pretty hard to maintain that you're just an innocent victim of a corrupt system targeting you unfairly. Where does this leave us in terms of Trump's overall legal situation and political prospects? The short answer is that things just got exponentially worse in ways that are going to be really difficult to recover from. Trump was already facing an uphill battle on multiple legal fronts, with courts stripping away protections, investigations accelerating, and his political support evaporating. Now he's added threatening a federal judge to the list of problems that his legal team has to manage. The immediate concern is whether contempt charges get filed and how quickly that happens. Contempt of court can be charged and adjudicated very quickly. We could literally see formal charges within days if prosecutors and the judge decide to move forward. And contempt is one of those charges where the normal rules about burden of proof don't really apply in the same way. If the judge witnessed the threatening behavior firsthand, if it's documented in the court record, proving contempt is relatively straightforward. Trump's usual strategy of delay and obstruction doesn't work as well with contempt because judges have broad authority to impose immediate sanctions, including fines and even jail time for particularly egregious conduct. The prospect of Trump being held in contempt and potentially jailed, even briefly, is something that his legal team has to be absolutely terrified about because of how it would look and the precedent it would set. Imagine the headlines if a former president is thrown in jail for contempt of court. It would be an absolutely unprecedented development that would fundamentally change the landscape of American politics. The restrictions that could be imposed on Trump as a result of this incident are potentially severe and could impact his ability to defend himself. In other cases, judges have the authority to impose gag orders, to restrict defendants from attending certain hearings, to require that any future court appearances happen via video conference rather than in person. Trump thrives on being physically present, on being able to use his personality and presence to influence situations. If judges start restricting his ability to appear in court, if they impose strict gag orders that prevent him from talking about cases or judges, that fundamentally changes the dynamics of how Trump operates. He's always relied on being able to shape public perception through media appearances and public statements, on being able to intimidate and pressure through his large platform. Losing that ability would be a massive blow to his strategy. And here's the thing, after threatening one federal judge, other judges are going to be much more willing to impose these kinds of restrictions because they have a legitimate basis to believe Trump poses a risk of intimidation or obstruction. Every judge in every Trump case is now on notice that he's capable of this kind of behavior, which gives them legal justification to implement protective measures that limit Trump's ability to influence proceedings. The impact on public and legal perceptions cannot be overstated. We're watching in real time as the image of Trump transforms from former president and political leader to someone who's genuinely unhinged and dangerous. Threatening a federal judge is behavior that even Trump's most ardent supporters are going to have trouble defending. It's one thing to rail against the system, to claim persecution, to argue that investigations are politically motivated. It's another thing entirely to directly threaten the people who are supposed to be impartially administering justice. Legal experts who've been following Trump's cases are saying this incident is a watershed moment that changes how everyone involved in these prosecutions is going to approach Trump going forward. Prosecutors are going to be less willing to negotiate or show flexibility. Judges are going to be more strict about enforcing rules and imposing sanctions. Even Trump's own lawyers are going to be more cautious about the advice they give and the strategies they pursue because they now know their client is capable of completely undermining their work with impulsive outbursts. The professional reputation of lawyers associated with Trump's defense is on the line, and continuing to represent someone who threatens judges is going to make it harder for them to be taken seriously in other cases. This is the kind of incident that makes lawyers start thinking about withdrawing from representation because they can't effectively represent a client who won't control himself in court. The acceleration of Trump's legal risk that results from this incident is going to make future hearings and trials even more pivotal and potentially explosive. We're now in a situation where every single court appearance becomes a high-stakes drama where everyone is watching to see if Trump can maintain composure or if he's going to have another outburst. That's an enormous amount of pressure that's only going to make things worse. Trump doesn't perform well under sustained pressure when he can't control the narrative or intimidate his opponents. Courts are environments where Trump Trump has no real power. He can't bully judges the way he bullied contractors or political rivals. He can't use his media platform to change the facts of what happened. He can't rely on loyal supporters to bail him out of legal jeopardy. He's just another defendant who has to follow the rules and accept the authority of the court, which is something Trump has never been good at doing. The more cornered he feels, the more likely he is to lash out in ways that make his situation worse. We could be looking at a spiral where each legal setback triggers worse behavior, which triggers more sanctions and restrictions, which makes him feel even more desperate, which triggers even worse behavior. It's a vicious cycle that could end with Trump completely melting down in public in ways that destroy whatever remaining political support he has. We're already seeing the beginning of that cycle play out in real time. The courtroom outburst and threats against the judge are evidence that Trump is feeling increasingly desperate and cornered. And desperate people make bad decisions, which is exactly what we're witnessing. Threatening a federal judge represents a point of no return in Trump's legal battles. Any possibility of negotiated resolutions or lenient treatment has evaporated, and he will now face the full force of the justice system without the flexibility that might have been available. For the Republican Party, this behavior makes it nearly impossible to defend or explain away. And for Trump's legal team, judges will become less tolerant of delay tactics and procedural games. This incident may be remembered as the key moment when Trump's fate was sealed. The sentencing implications, as we've discussed, are absolutely devastating for Trump. If he gets convicted of anything, and let's be honest, that's looking increasingly likely given how his legal battles are going, the judge is going to remember this incident. They're going to consider it as an aggravating factor. They're going to view Trump as someone who doesn't respect the justice system and who needs to be punished accordingly. That could mean the difference between a sentence at the low end of the guidelines and a sentence at the high end. It could even mean a sentence above the guidelines in particularly egregious cases. Trump's lawyers know this. They've been trying to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening, and now their client has made their job exponentially harder. The broader institutional implications are equally troubling. When a former president threatens a federal judge, it sends a message to the entire country that the rule of law doesn't matter, that powerful people can do whatever they want without consequences, that the justice system is just another political battlefield where threats and intimidation are acceptable tactics. That's a dangerous message to send in a democracy. It undermines public confidence in the courts. It makes it harder for judges to do their jobs effectively. It creates an environment where political violence becomes more likely because people see that even the most powerful figures in the country can act with impunity. The damage that Trump is doing to American institutions with this kind of behavior is incalculable. But here's the thing about the justice system that Trump seems to have forgotten. It's designed to be resilient. It's designed to withstand attacks from powerful people. Judges have seen defendants try to intimidate them before. They have tools to respond to that kind of behavior. And they're not afraid to use those tools. What we're seeing now is the justice system pushing back against someone who thinks he's above the law. And the pushback is going to be severe. Trump has finally encountered an institution that won't be intimidated, that won't be bullied, that won't give him special treatment because of who he is. And his reaction to that reality has been to lash out in ways that only make his situation worse. The most troubling aspect of all of this is what it reveals about Trump's psychological state. Someone who threatens a federal judge is not someone who's thinking clearly. Someone who can't control their emotions in a courtroom setting is not someone who's capable of making good decisions under pressure. Trump is clearly feeling the walls closing in. He's clearly desperate and scared. And desperate, scared people do desperate, scary things. The question now is whether Trump's behavior is going to continue to escalate, whether we're going to see more incidents like this, whether the spiral is going to continue until something truly catastrophic happens. That's not a pleasant question to contemplate, but it's one that we have to ask given what we've just witnessed. Threatening a federal judge isn't just bad strategy, it's potentially criminal conduct that exposes Trump to immediate contempt charges and makes every future legal proceeding significantly harder to win. The incident demonstrates a complete inability to accept the constraints of the rule of law, accelerates the collapse of his political support, and may be remembered as the key moment when his legal fate was sealed. The justice system has teeth, and it's about to bite.